Welcome back to Fire Emblem Thracia 776. This is chapter 19, which is kind of like a transitional chapter. There's not much to it, but it is a very dire situation. Now, we have a few things to talk about, and hopefully I can get through them all, even at one-time speed, just about a little over 20 minutes of footage here. This is, what's happening in the story, if you don't know, is that Leaf, sent an advance party with Dorius at the helm, and they got ambushed, and Dorius is dead. All of his men are dead, except for, the one guy that came back to warn Leaf. And presumably some of your units are part of that advance party, which is why your units are split up in this chapter. One is at the extreme south end, and one is at the north end, which are the units coming to back them up. Basically, I think that's what is intended here. So the way that this chapter tries to spring the surprise on you is by the way that it handles deployment. And I don't know that I've talked about this at all in any of the previous chapters. So deployment might seem random in this game, but what it actually is that in a chapter like this, or in the previous chapter, it's going based on who you've used most recently. Those are the people at the top of the deployment screen when you're in preps. And then in a chapter where you have more than one group, it alternates, essentially. It's like Leaf, and then is always in the same spot, and then it's one group has a unit, then the next group has a unit, then the other group has a unit. So it's sort of like you're picking teams in sports. Now, another thing to report is that from this point on, well, for this chapter specifically, I wasn't going to play it with animations on no matter what, because look at all these units. I've done this chapter, just casually without recording with animations on, and for like a turn, and it's the worst thing imaginable. So I knew I wasn't going to use animations here. But then also, I think I previously mentioned that I played all the chapters from 15 to wherever this run ends, all in one day. And I was saying to myself, you know what, I'm going to be employing some kind of risky strategies, some stuff that I have not done before at the speed that I'm going to be doing them. So I don't know how long some of these chapters are going to take, so I'm not going to do animations anymore, I don't think. And another part of the reason for that was I had already released like the first few chapters on YouTube when I had done this, and I realized that playing with animations on and playing at a slow enough pace where you can, realistically Ironman, it's basically like the chapters get too long for this type of scripted or like semi-scripted improvised commentary. It just doesn't really work out. And so for future playthroughs, I'll probably, if I'm going to be commentating it in this fashion, I will probably do it with animations off from the start. So, lesson learned. I think it'll flow better from here on to the end. So, these enemy phases are slow, even if you have animations off. And it's actually worse if you do what you're supposed to be doing in this chapter, and that's you can get one of those groups to turn coat if you use your route-specific magic user to recruit one of the paladins. So that's Amalda there in the lower leftish, and then Conamore is in the lower rightish. They always move last, so they're easy to see. So rest in peace, Pawn. That sucks. But this is what is supposed to happen on this chapter. If you play it without metagaming without using outside tools. That's what's supposed to happen. That's the point of this chapter. You're supposed to be in a bad situation, and you know, like, so another way that they try to screw you is the previous chapter's indoors, right? So you're thinking to yourself, well, I can still use guys like Fergus if I want, because he uses swords, so he'll be fine indoors. Used him through all of Manchester. And that the more mounted units you use, the more screwed you'll be in this chapter, for reasons you probably can see here now. Which is why I didn't deploy very many mounted units in the last chapter. If you had a keen eye, perhaps you noticed that. If I did, I don't think I deployed them in this chapter. So what I typically do in this chapter, in Ironman's especially, is I will deploy a lot of filler mounted units like, Kane, Alva, Robert, etc., just to help with rescuing. And then, if these guys do catch up to you, the likelihood that they kill or seriously injure like a good unit, I'm sorry to say, is lower, conceivably, sort of. Unfortunately, you still just have no control over who goes where. So, I don't think I deployed Finn, because I think this is like the one chapter where Finn has a decent chance of dying. Unfortunately, even if everybody's mounted, the problem is that this Arc Knight, or like Bow Knight, whatever you want to call them, and then also Connemore have a decent chance of catching up to you regardless. And here you're seeing Glade eat it. That's for me, that's like a worse loss. And I know, unfortunately, Safi is a little bit exposed here now. Let's wait a minute and have a moment of silence for Glade and see how the rest of this turn plays out before I continue on this commentary. Unfortunately, Connemore didn't alert his men that his princess was right there out in the open. I guess his eyesight is waning in his like middle age, old age. I actually thought Safi was done for there. I thought that guy would go for Safi, because remember, those ranged units, the 2 range only units, don't capture. So he could have gone for Safi, but I guess she was probably a little bit speedier, a little bit hardier in some ways than Miranda, which made her the better target. So, all things considered, that was good. And now we can do what I should have done to begin with, which was just, have her rewarp. The reason I didn't is because I thought that maybe I could get her to warp Miranda at some point. But the thing is, you have to do that at the beginning of your turn so that Miranda can still use her action. Now, if you do that with Sleuth or Miranda to recruit your respective paladin, ideally you want to do it on turn 1, but maybe you can get it done on turn 2, depending on where they spawn. There wasn't a way to do it here. There is a case maybe that I could have positioned Miranda in such a way that, like, if Connemore got a movement star, then he might have put himself in range of Miranda, and like the Bow Knight would have been a non-issue at that point. She could just run around and then like end up getting rescued by Connemore and moving up. And that's exactly what you can do if you are able to warp those guys to their paladin. Is it'll turn that whole group green. You can have the paladin rescue the caster unit and just run away. And that actually makes the chapter, like, it really declaws it. Because what'll happen is the 2 groups will fight among each other, and they'll get held up for turns and turns doing that. And it's especially good if you, this is another instance of what I like to call A-route supremacy, where if you are recruiting a Malda, then what you can do is Malda can rescue Sleuth, And then she moves up to where these houses are in the lower left, and she can actually visit a couple of them and still get away scot-free. And those houses are some of the only ones on this map that actually have something useful. A lot of them just have like pure waters and crap. I think one of the ones on the northern part of the map here has a wind tome, which is pretty cool. And, you know, they're items, like, you know, they're not completely useless no matter what they are. But in point of fact, don't kill yourself trying to get them all. There are some that, like, you can't really get to no matter what unless you get a movement star. That's just how it is. It's the ones around the middle. These thieves go straight for them, and no matter who you are, you can't catch up to them just on a regular turn-by-turn basis. Something that hurt Glade especially before he died was, I think he was carrying one of these civilians, or he was carrying Safi, I guess. But the civilians do apply to this whole situation here, which is that if all of those civilians escape at the very top, along with your units, this is an escape chapter. If all of them escape, you get another night proof, which, in retrospect, I probably should have just said screw it. There wasn't really, like, especially because I went B route, there wasn't anybody really left to promote. You'll notice that I still haven't promoted Safi, and the reason for that is, like, I mean, if a unit already has A rank staves, the only reason to promote them is just for, like, an extra little bit of magic, which, don't get me wrong, is important, especially for, like, casting, you know, statuses on enemy units. You need to have higher magic than the enemy. But it's, all in all, it's, like, it's whatever. I would almost even rather put it on a combat unit and get them a little bit of bonus stats than I would somebody who's already at A rank staves or is going to reach it. So the only reason, really, in my mind, for promoting Safi is, like, toward the beginning of the game, if you don't want to wait. Which is something that I'm slowly coming to realize might be the better option. But I just like Tina so much. It's just a personal preference. You can do either. You can give it the elite manual to somebody you like, or you can not. It's up to you. You can succeed both ways with just a little bit of mindfulness. So as you might expect, you can end this chapter whenever you want. And if your bottom units are in a bad spot, and if you want, what you can do is you can just end the map. And if I haven't mentioned this, any captured units besides those funny chapters we talked about a while back will come back in a future guidance. And you only get that guidance if at least one unit is captured. So this is a good opportunity, because I think this is the last escape chapter before then. If you want to access that guidance, then you should leave somebody behind. And there's more reasons than just getting your guys back to visit that guidance. There's treasures there. Not so much the treasures in the chests. There's like kind of like crap in the chests there, but you can get a bunch of warp staves there, a bunch of other stuff. If we make it there, maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is, I believe, your last chance to leave somebody behind. And yeah, just remember that they don't have to actually be physically captured by an enemy unit. You just have to have Leaf escape before them. The reason I mention that is because I actually had somebody get killed when I was trying to get them captured in like one of my first runs of this game. I just had a little mental block about it and thought that they had to be like physically picked up by an enemy unit, and they ended up getting killed by that Arc Knight, which was very sad. But let me just say, I have no idea what these guys are doing here with these civilians. It's actually kind of anticlimactic for this chapter because I was like, so maybe I'm a little sick in the head, but I actually like in Iron Man's and just in general when like units die, when your units die. I think that's what makes playthroughs different. It's what keeps the game interesting in Fire Emblem is being forced to reckon with units that you normally wouldn't and strategies you normally wouldn't, and having to think on your feet more if units die. And I shouldn't be what's the word, greedy about this, because Miranda died, Glade died, and Pond died, and those are all, well, not so much Miranda, but those are some pretty bad losses. So I did get punished in this chapter. But it's just, when I see things like, you know, a ton of enemy units, like, circling a hapless civilian like that, it's kind of, it's one of those moments that reminds me that I'm playing a video game. You know what I mean? So, you know, whatever, I guess. There's plenty more opportunity for units to get killed. So I can satisfy my dark desires at a later date. Units will keep pouring in from the bottom. So this isn't the kind of situation where if you're feeling daring, you can just take on all these guys. As with some of the other chapters, they do eventually stop after like a million turns, but I think you'll run out of weapon uses before then, to be perfectly honest. And that's even if you get one of these groups to turn traitor. There's just too many units, especially with these like bandits in the way and crap like that also. You can easily hit the unit limit on this, I'm pretty sure. I haven't watched it that closely. But you know, on the bottom there's like Ballista, there's a boss that I've never taken on. There's like other promoted units that you can actually see here. There's like a Duke Knight there. That Arc Knight is a promoted unit. It's just all sorts of guys that can mess you up. There's just no real alternate way to do this chapter. You can hold them off to some degree and kind of bait them away, but sooner or later you have to escape. I mean, your flyers are pretty safe in this map, no matter where they spawn, as long as they spawn mounted. But you do still have to be careful. I've had Dean spawn in the lower part and like get in some like maybe a little bit dicey situations. The thing is, they can fly over the trees, which might impede all the mounted units a little bit. Amalda's group is like, they're mostly troubadours, I think. I can't see them anymore because they're all dead, or not dead, but they're all in this little mix up in the middle. And units like that, it's just more like finesse units. I think they have rapiers and like Thoron tomes or something. And then the Connemore group has you know, like more generic combat units, sort of. So now we see that they're finally like sort of breaking through and not just going for this like whatever the hell is going on with this child here. I shudder to think. I mean, there are child hunts in this game, but I don't quite know what this is. But that's okay. So we're not getting either of Amalda or Connemore, and Amalda is the better unit in the long term. Connemore is the better combat unit, don't get me wrong. He has like A rank everything. He has more authority stars than Amalda, I think. I think he has like 2 to her 1 or something. It's just better stats. He gets a one of those fat 20% bonuses from Miranda because, you know, he's her retainer or whatever. So there's generally some pluses to Connemore, like, don't get me wrong. But Amalda, being a female paladin, has access to staves. And it's not like an astronomically high staff rank. It's like C, I think. Which is like, you know, about what Nana would have if you trained her to this point. But that's still useful, as I think I've said before. She can use like Torch, which is useful for like upcoming guidance, and or maybe it's just one guidance actually. She can use Restore, and that's all great, especially because the last few maps are indoors, so that like really nerfs Connemore compared to Amalda. Amalda also has good weapon ranks, so she can use. I mean, you've seen her using the Master Sword and everything. So she can also get some combat done. She can use something like the Flame Sword, and then her like higher magic will help her there. If you still happen to have a Flame Sword, or if you manage to get one. So you know. Leaf escapes now. Don't think we left anything behind. I think we're all good. Got all our T's crossed and I's dotted, except for all the dead people and everything. That kind of sucked. Really sucks for Leaf, no matter what happens in the chapter. This is a kind of a dark period for him. And this is just a little fun factoid. This is like more or less where Leaf comes in Fire Emblem 4, this being a side quill, so to speak. So if you're playing these games chronologically, so to speak, which I wouldn't recommend. I tried to sort of do it once, and then I was like hooked on Fire Emblem 5, so I ended up completing it when I shouldn't have, that kind of thing. Then, you know, Fire Emblem 4 Chapter 7 begins here, more or less, and then you have to play like half of that chapter, and then you come back and play another chapter here. So that's where that fits in, is what I'm saying. But the next chapter is, I don't know what to call it. I like it, although it is kind of a chapter with a lot of things that I specifically don't like in it. So we'll see how I feel about it when I do the recording for that. But thank you for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.